The laughter started before anyone even noticed the two small figures standing at the edge of the school auditorium, as if the world had already decided they were part of the joke. It was the kind of laughter that didn't come from joy but from cruelty dressed up as entertainment, the kind that echoes longer in the hearts of those it targets than in the walls of any room. No one knew that the moment those twin girls were asked to sing, everything was about to change, not just for them, but for a tired single father who had already given up believing that life could still surprise him with something good. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of compassion that can change lives when least expected, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. The single father's name was Daniel, a man whose face looked older than his years because life had leaned too heavily on his shoulders for too long. He had once dreamed of a simple, honest life, but dreams had a way of breaking when his wife passed away suddenly, leaving him alone with responsibilities that never paused to let him breathe. Daniel worked long hours driving delivery trucks, hands rough, eyes always tired, heart constantly worried about bills, food, and the quiet loneliness that greeted him every night. He had learned to survive by lowering his expectations, telling himself that as long as he could get through each day, that was enough. He never imagined that two hungry, frightened twin girls he found one rainy evening would become the center of a story far bigger than his own pain. He found them behind a closed grocery store, huddled together under a torn piece of cardboard, their thin shoes soaked, their hair tangled, and their eyes too old for their young faces. They were silent, not crying, not asking for help, just watching the world as if they had already learned it rarely stopped for children like them. Daniel didn't know why he stopped that night. Maybe it was because he saw his own exhaustion reflected in their stillness, or maybe it was because grief had carved a hollow in his chest that kindness somehow wanted to fill. He took them home, fed them, found out they had no parents left and nowhere to go, and without planning to, became something he never expected to be again, a protector. Raising the twins, Lily and Lila, was not easy. They were fragile, underfed, and carried invisible scars from nights spent hungry and afraid. Daniel struggled, counting coins, skipping meals, working extra shifts, and learning how to braid hair and pack school lunches with hands meant for heavy labor. The girls rarely spoke at first, but they listened to everything. Music was the one thing that softened them. They hummed quietly while doing homework, while washing dishes, while sitting on the floor of the small apartment that barely fit the three of them. Daniel noticed it but didn't think much of it. He had no time for dreams. Survival came first. At school, however, the twins were different. Their worn clothes, quiet nature, and shared silence made them easy targets. Children can be cruel without fully understanding the damage they cause, and some teachers, overwhelmed and distracted, missed the signs. When the school announced a talent assembly meant to celebrate student abilities, it quickly became something else entirely. Whispers spread that the poor twins barely spoke and certainly couldn't sing. A group of students dared a teacher to call them up, framing it as encouragement but fueled by mockery. The invitation wasn't kind, it was a setup. Lily and Lila were told they would sing. Together, their names read aloud in front of a room full of students waiting to be amused. Daniel didn't know any of this when he sat at the back of the auditorium that day, hands clasped tightly, heart heavy. He had taken time off work he couldn't afford because the girls had asked him to come. They hadn't explained why, only that it mattered. The room buzzed with restless energy, laughter already floating in the air. When the twins walked onto the stage, small and pale under the bright lights, the murmurs grew louder. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He recognized that look on their faces, the same look they had the night he found them, the look of children bracing themselves for disappointment. The first few seconds were unbearable. The room wasn't quiet out of respect but anticipation, waiting for failure. Daniel held his breath, anger and fear mixing into something that made his hands shake. Then the girls began to sing. It started softly, almost uncertainly, but then something extraordinary happened. Their voices blended in a way that didn't feel learned but natural, as if they had always been meant to sing together. The sound wasn't loud, but it was pure, filled with emotion that carried every lonely night, every skipped meal, every silent tear they had never learned how to cry out loud. The laughter stopped. One by one, students fell silent. Teachers froze. The room seemed to shrink around the sound of their voices, as if the air itself was listening. There was no technique anyone could explain, no polished training, just raw feeling pouring out of two small hearts that had known too much pain. Daniel felt tears slide down his face before he realized he was crying. He wasn't embarrassed. For the first time in years, he felt something other than exhaustion. He felt pride, awe, and a strange sense that maybe, just maybe, life hadn't finished giving them hope. When the song ended, the silence lingered. It wasn't awkward or empty, it was full, heavy with emotion. Then applause erupted, not polite clapping but thunderous, unstoppable applause that rose from every corner of the room. Some students looked ashamed, others stunned, many moved in ways they didn't understand yet. The twins stood frozen, eyes wide, unsure how to react to something they had never experienced before: respect. Daniel stood too, heart pounding, realizing that this moment would change everything, even if he didn't yet know how. After that day, things slowly shifted. Teachers began to pay attention. The girls were offered vocal lessons through a community program. Daniel was approached by people who had never noticed him before, people who saw potential not just in the twins but in the quiet man who had saved them without asking for recognition. Life didn't suddenly become easy. Bills didn't disappear, and grief didn't vanish overnight. But there was movement now, a sense of direction. The twins smiled more, laughed softly at home, and sang without fear. Their voices filled the small apartment, transforming it into a place of warmth instead of survival. Daniel still worked long hours, but he no longer felt invisible. He attended every performance, every rehearsal, sitting in the back, hands clasped, eyes shining. He learned that sometimes purpose doesn't arrive as a grand plan but as a simple choice to care when it's inconvenient. He learned that saving someone else can quietly save you too. The twins learned that their voices mattered, not because they were perfect, but because they were honest. Years later, Daniel would still remember the sound of that auditorium falling silent, the exact moment hope walked back into his life. Not as a miracle, but as a reminder that kindness echoes farther than cruelty ever could. Two girls once asked to sing. As a joke had unknowingly sung their way into dignity, into opportunity, and into a future no one had bothered to imagine for them. And one tired single father learned that even the most broken beginnings can lead to moments so powerful they change the direction of many lives at once.